Right, kia ora koutou, ko Rachel Hooks tōku ingoa, ko Hayden Kinraid tēnā. Me mahi ana maua ki I tiakitanga pūtao Aotearoa. We work for Biosecurity New Zealand, and we are talking today about protecting freshwater environments from overseas pests that we don't currently have in Aotearoa. So what we'll cover is, actually first I'll just touch on the biosecurity system really briefly, and then I'll pass to Hayden, who will talk through freshwater pests in New Zealand already, and then what we're looking at for overseas. He's going to introduce a new freshwater pest watch list and considerations behind each of the taxonomic groups that went into that watch list, so fish, invertebrates and plants, and then we'll speak on ongoing research into targeted surveillance for these, and then pass back to me and I will talk about aquatic disease, general surveillance and engagement. So first of all, this is a really well-used graphic and hopefully everyone's familiar with it, but it is important that we understand that what we do is part of a much wider system, and at each level, pre-border, post, and at the border and post-border, we are working to mitigate biosecurity risk. What we're focusing on today is surveillance and incursion investigation, so that is post-border, but just post-border before anything like response or pest management.
Cool. So we know the establishment of pest species in the freshwater environment has been an issue for a long time. We've got over 200 species already naturalised here that are invasive, and your long-term pest management plans are focusing on the worst of those species. And there's ever-increasing threats. Of course, we've heard today about the gold clam, the establishment of that causing massive economic costs and huge resourcing costs that will continue onwards and onwards. If we can't eradicate it, which is very, very difficult when you don't detect it early enough. So that sort of leads into what we're discussing today, and these are some overseas headlines of some of the worst threats that we're fortunate enough not to have in New Zealand yet. We've got invasive crayfish, invasive mussels, and some very invasive freshwater weeds throughout America and Europe. So we have this newly developed freshwater pest watch list, and you wouldn't have seen this before because it's hot off the press, so none of you have got it yet, but we've got them here, and please come up to our MPI stand and grab a copy of them, and we'll hand them out to anyone involved in freshwater biosecurity or anyone who gets out in the freshwater environments. Ultimately, this guide is to enhance the awareness of these freshwater pest species we don't want to naturalise in New Zealand, and it features identifying features to identify the species and their typical habitat preferences. So I'll go through each of the taxa groups that we've profiled in the guide and just highlight a couple of the species as we go through. So the invertebrate category, this one features some of our most high profile overseas pests. You've likely heard of the zebra mussel or golden mussel causing huge impacts overseas. Zebra mussel well spread throughout America, golden mussel recently arrived in America. And then a number of crayfish species, marbled crayfish, signal crayfish, and others, which would all be devastating for our native kora, known carriers of a crayfish plague. Would devastate our native population of kora, as well as a number of other ecosystem impacts. Moving on to the plant taxa group. So the establishment of freshwater plants historically has been related to the pond trade or the aquarium trade of freshwater pest plants. We know this to be an issue, and we know that illegal importation of these pest plants still happens. We still detect them at the border from time to time. Hopefully we stop all of them, but if we're detecting them at the border, there's a chance that they could slip through. So we use the aquatic reed risk assessment model, which was developed by NIWA many years ago, and essentially we assess the value of or the pest rating of these different pest species that are traded internationally overseas, as well as non-naturalised freshwater pest plants within the New Zealand trade that haven't naturalised here yet, but if they're cultivated here, there's obviously increased risk of them naturalising. So broadleaf arrowhead, for example, we think is cultivated here in low numbers and potentially could naturalise. Floating pennywort, European frogbit, classic examples of plants traded overseas for pond and aquarium. The fish taxa group, these species you might recognise, they're a bit closer to home. They've traded in New Zealand for a long time through the legal trade of aquarium fish species. They haven't established in the natural environment, so you might wonder why are we highlighting these species, and essentially it's due to the climatic change over time. We know we're getting more warm years recorded on record. 8 out of the last 10 years have been the highest recorded year, and it seems like every year that keeps getting added to. So the chances of these species naturalising in our environment increase, and potentially illegal dumping of aquarium fish species or aquarium contents in general is an ongoing risk. So that's a little bit about the guide, and obviously it's a great tool for general surveillance, and it's a great tool to have in your truck as you're doing regular pest surveillance in freshwater environments. But of course you might be wondering, what about targeted surveillance? Is there some program to identify high risk sites? What about the survey methodologies? What methods are best? What's the pros and cons of each method? This is all the really important stuff, and what I've been spending a lot of time on developing recently. So essentially it can be boiled down into what species should we be targeting, and that's highlighted in the Pest ID guide, and we've got a refined list for targeted surveillance. Where we should be looking, so risk-based determination of high-risk sites. It's a bit more complicated in the freshwater space compared to, say, marine, where you'd focus on the ports. The arrival of freshwater pests can be a bit more variable, so there's a bit of work into identifying those high-risk sites, and then how do we detect them? What's the best methods, and what's the surveillance sensitivity and specificity of those different methods? Calculating in all of those different things, the environmental factors, habitat, anthropogenic factors, and more. So that's some exciting research, and definitely keen to discuss that more over lunch or through dinners at the stand as well. I'll hand back to Rachel.
Thanks, Hayden. So in addition to the taxa that Hayden's just highlighted, we also have a page on freshwater disease, because of two reasons. One, obviously we want to receive reports of any disease to investigate, but also because these organisms that are in the watch list can be carriers of significant unwanted or notifiable organisms which cause disease. For example, we have crayfish plague Aphanomyces asdisi, which is currently not in New Zealand, but it is a highly infectious fungus that could devastate our native Koda or Kiwi populations. So in order to look out for freshwater disease, the main sign will be mass mortality, so that is an unusually large amount of dead organisms, typically of a single species, but not always. We can have multi-species mass mortalities. And you might wonder what we consider to be a mass mortality, which is a question that we get a lot. But basically it depends on the organism, and it is case by case. So for some species it'll be hundreds and thousands of an organism, but for something like tuna, our freshwater eels, we might consider 3 to be enough for us to further investigate. So if you suspect it's a mass mortality, report it, and then we can go from there. Other signs of aquatic disease are unusual behaviour. So for fish, this might be erratic swimming or gasping at the surface. For invertebrates or shellfish, it might be that they're slow to close, or they kind of touch to substrate properly, or excessive biofouling, so they aren't able, like crayfish for example, if they're not able to clean themselves off, that could be a sign of disease. We also have unusual appearance as another sign of disease, so there's a mass mortality. So lesions, like the photo of the fish on the left there, lumps, bumps, growths, and then we've got a red rock lobster here with necrosis on its tail fan. That can be another sign of disease. With aquatic animals, it's really difficult to assign a sign to a disease, so it's not really specific for any type of disease. So it's just important that if you notice something unusual, you report it so that it can be investigated further. Also with freshwater disease for aquatic animals, we're really limited on the tests that we can run with not extremely fresh samples. So ringing the 0800 number to get samples quickly to our animal health laboratory is super important. A lot of times we can't do bacteriology on things that have been frozen or have been sitting out in the sun for a couple of days. It's just not going to work, unfortunately. Oh, just one more thing on that as well is that our testing at Animal Health Laboratory is for exotic diseases. So if you do ring us and we investigate further, we might not ever find a cause, but it's still important that we can rule out these exotic organisms so that we can continue to know that we don't have things like Aphanomyces astaci in the country. And moving on to general surveillance, so Hayden mentioned that we are working on a targeted surveillance program for freshwater, but general surveillance is here and now. It's what you guys are all doing, being the eyes and ears across the country. When people are out and about and notice something is wrong, they can report it to us via either the 0800 80 99 66 hotline or online. We have a nice online reporting tool as well where you can upload photos. If it's appropriate and you're trained, we might ask you to help with sample collection and submission as well. And we will keep you up to date as we go through testing at our lab. And yeah, these guides that have been produced, so the Freshwater Pest Watch List that's at the stand, but also the Marine Pest ID Guide are part of that education tool which improves general surveillance. And on top of that as well is engagement, so things like this where we get out to talk to you guys so that people are aware that these species are on our radar. We should know what to look for, and knowing how to report as well, and being empowered and willing to report, I guess, is the other part of it. For us as well, partnering with Māori, Tiwi Māori is really important. This poster was created and distributed to Te Tera Whakamātaki and other iwi-led organisations to invite Māori on board to this project to have input and development and help develop this program. We are currently still looking for engagement and partnership, so if you know anyone that wants to engage with us, you can reach out to the Freshwater Surveillance at MPI email address, or Hayden or myself. And finally, what can you do? So most important messages are to report the unusual. If you see anything that you think might be a new to New Zealand pest or disease, give us a call. We're not scary, we're just regular people, so if you want to have a call and a chat, we can talk through whether it might be something worth further investigation or not. For aquarium owners as well, just don't dump anything into waterways. That includes water, we want that down the drain, and any aquatic species or materials should be treated as a biosecurity risk and bagged and put into landfill when they are no longer of use. And of course, fishing, boating and dive gear, making sure that you clean between waterways, and especially if coming back from overseas. And for you guys as well, education is super important, so taking this watch list and spreading it in your communities and in your groups will be super helpful as well. Yeah, we have a link to the online version of the guide as well, but if you want a physical copy, you can come and see us at the stand or email us and we can send it to you too. Thank you.
We have time for questions for Rachel and Hayden. Anybody's got any? Are you engaging with the aquarium industry to try and remove some of these pests from the trade industry?
Yeah, so the aquarium fish species we've got here currently have been in the trade for a long time, and it would be difficult to remove the species that have, because we've targeted the species that are the most commonly imported. So essentially, it's the whole industry. Yeah, so that would be a battle, but yeah, essentially it's around education, around not dumping fish, and there's strong import health standards to stop any additional fish species being traded in New Zealand.
I could add to that though, that regional councils have got powers of the regional pest management plans to ban species from their regions or from the sale and trade in their regions. And so some councils are looking at that for a range of species, including some freshwater pets. Pets, as well as the idea of having a sort of a, how do you want to call it now, but the pet trade kind of agreement to reduce the risk voluntarily for some of those species.
So this seems pretty focused on the post-water surveillance of the import system. Is this education going to be presented to pre-water and water facilities as well?
Yeah. So we're definitely sitting in the post-water space with this piece of work, but of course it's part of the wider biosecurity system, and there is important work on pathways, ballast water treatment pathways, and other such things like that are definitely part of the wider program of work. But I guess Rachel and myself focusing on the New Zealand, the incursion investigation and the surveillance if it arrives. But yeah, obviously prevention is the number one thing if we can do that.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you very much.